Welcome to Wealth Coherence. I'm your host, Emily Bouchard, a social worker specializing in human development and fascinated by human potential. For over 20 years, I've been a coach to families with successful businesses and leaders with successful careers, and you may be surprised to learn that true wealth is about coherence. When our inner state of being aligns with how we live, give, lead, and love. In this series, we will explore an integrated model to flourish coherently, because wealth isn't what we have, it's who we are when we are fully aligned. Well, welcome to this edition of Wealth Coherence. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to Ruschelle Khanna, who is a respected and esteemed colleague of mine in the space of coaching and counseling and therapeutic support for families that have significant wealth in terms of how to have the family benefit as much from the wealth and really minimize the burdens and the pitfalls that can happen when it comes to having wealth. And this whole show is about wealth coherence. And we are going to be talking in specifics about Ruschelle and her vision for a book that's coming out soon that I was a part of. I was one of the contributing authors, called From Echo to Athena. And we're going to talk about the idea, where it came from and what it's about, and why it's really a worthwhile endeavor to have this book come out into the world. So welcome, Ruschelle. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Emily. It's always a pleasure to see you.
You too. And I'd love for you to share, since we have a really wonderful, extensive bio about you, what's one thing for listeners to know about you that they wouldn't know necessarily by reading your bio? Some nugget about you as a person.
Yeah, I don't think I have in the bio that I am from the hills of Southern West Virginia. And I'm someone who's very connected to place. And I feel like the places that we come from have a big impact on us. So I love the mountains, and I feel like I'm a kind of a product of the mountains. So.
Wow, that's great. I'm coming to you from the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas in Northern California, and I definitely resonate with being in the mountains and near them. So that's wonderful. And I'm so curious how you tuned into Greek mythology and what had you choose to put out in the world the idea of a book that's called From Echo to Athena. I want you to say what the second part of it is and why this book needed to come into existence.
Yeah, so the second part is the evolution of women in the great wealth transfer. And so the initial idea came from a panel for family offices out of South Africa, and it was all women. So it was about women and wealth in those spaces. And I met our co-authors Zita and Stacy, and they're two incredible colleagues of mine as well. And I met them and I thought, oh my goodness, we must write a book together. So I kind of met them and I thought, these women are fantastic. And so we must do something. And that was just off of, I had just finished my first book called Inherited Trauma and Family Wealth. And that book was all about uncovering inherited patterns in families and in ourselves in order to have a better relationship with money. While I was writing that book, someone said to me, oh, this sounds like a family echo. This sounds like these echoes in these families. And so as I was writing it, I came up with this framework of the echo framework, because that was actually how I worked with families. I helped families put in strategies for effective communication. Compassionate decision making is the C. Honoring our resources, so being really respectful of what we're given, and then being open to receive things. So I finished that book and I ended with Echo. And in the book, I reference the story of Echo briefly, or I was kind of looking at that story, the Greek myth of Echo and Narcissus. And as I studied that story, I thought, oh, there are a lot of parallels here about Echo and Narcissus and wealth. There are like so many layers of stories that are in that story. The classic narcissist in the high net worth home is in that story. The story of people's echoes in your family that never get heard. So I did a little bit of diving into the Greek myth, which I love myth. I love classical literature. And I thought, wow, the more I hear this story, the more something resonates with me about this character of Echo, who has had her voice stolen. Now, anybody that knows me knows that on the surface, I'm not a very quiet person. I speak my opinions. I'm not super reserved.
Mhm.
But there was an element of me that felt stifled. And maybe that element was around money. And so I wanted to dive into that a little bit more for my own personal life. And then I thought, well, wait, if I feel like I don't have a voice with money, or it's not strong enough, or it could be better, then maybe other women feel that way. And then it kind of spiraled. I was like, wait a minute. There's a whole Greek pantheon of women here that we can dive into. And then I realized, wait, all these stories are written by men. This story of Echo was not written by a woman. There's no female influence in writing this. And in my own work doing ancestral healing and knowing that women in family systems are often not given credit for what they've done. How many times have women done something cool and the men in their lives just took it and made money off of it? I mean, we can think of 1,000 authors who stole ideas from their wives, right? And wrote something. So I thought, I think we've got some collective healing to do here. If I had been looking at healing on the individual level and on the family level, and I thought, wait, maybe we can look at these collective stories and see if we can all heal our money story together, especially as women. Not just women. I love my husband. I have a son. I'm not anti-man. I want them to have happy lives too, but if the women can start taking control of their own narratives. And so I came up with the title of the book, and then I started reaching out to the many incredible women that I had met over the past 3 years, kind of networking on LinkedIn and looking for a tribe of women who are doing amazing things. And then Emily, you're one of them. And I just kind of asked you all to come along on this exploration of myth with me and to see if we could maybe grow together.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And the other part I would say about the echo myth that really struck me in terms of what happens with intergenerational wealth is not only was her voice stolen, but the only way she could communicate was by repeating back what was said by others. And I think about what it means to be a member of a family where there's certain voices that are the ones that are deferred to or that are in those leadership roles. And there's an expectation to simply take on what they say and say that must be what's right, and as opposed to, wait, I have some innovative ideas, I have some ways of doing things differently, that other voice. And is that welcome or is it threatening, or is it welcome or does it feel like it's going in a different direction than how it's always been, right? I think that those are other dynamics that often will happen in families that tends to make it so there's this spoken desire for the next generation to be included. And yet, when it comes to bringing forth a different idea or having that voice, is it really received and respected and given a chance to try it out and see if it can be a great avenue to take? Or is it like, no, we're not actually going to do that? And I'm guessing that somebody in the book might have taken that on. I don't know. But it was an amazing process working with you on this book and meeting all these phenomenal authors that said yes to this call. And I want to also touch on Athena, and talk a little bit about your journey in terms of your experience of Echo and not feeling like you had the kind of voice you wanted to have with money. And what is Athena's story? And I would say the narrative of that that's so inspiring and empowering to consider. Because when you're thinking about going from something to something, what is that movement towards? And I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey with claiming your inner Athena.
Yeah. So I think most people, when they first see the title, believe that the interpretation, and maybe the only interpretation, is that we have to let go of Echo and no longer be her, and then transform into a different person, which would be Athena. And there's nothing wrong with that. That narrative works, and I think some people who will read the book will want that journey.
Mhm.
But for me, because I still work in the ancestral healing space, I kind of stayed back through the process of reading all of these, we have many different goddesses in the book and many
Mhm.
different myths, but I kind of stayed back and wanted to see how much I could respect Echo. I kind of treated Echo like an ancestor that I
Mhm.
should respect. Not that I have to stay with her or hold on to her problems or continue to be her, but she was very much someone that I looked at in terms of an ancestor, somebody who had a really hard life and did the best that they could and didn't make it fully out of their circumstances. So
Mhm.
so that was Echo. And then learning about Athena. So I specifically was looking for someone to write about Athena who had a trauma informed lens. And Kate
Mhm.
McGowan writes the chapter for Athena. She is a trauma informed coach. She's also worked with families for many years. Kate has also gone through her own very, very traumatic circumstances and overcame those. I didn't actually know that part when I asked her to be Athena, but Athena's whole story is about being birthed from a trauma. So someone told Zeus that he was going to bear a daughter, that his wife was pregnant, he was going to bear a daughter that would have more power than him. So Zeus ate his wife. So he did this, he cannibalized his wife. He did this horrible, horrible thing. And then Athena, who couldn't be contained, ruptured from his skull. Her entry into the world was this very traumatic. It wasn't the natural birth process where you get to have a mother, a loving mother who births you into the world. You came out the skull of a man. So Athena, for me, and I think Kate did a good job of this in the essay, was saying, look, we can experience really difficult things in our life, but there's life beyond trauma. So if we look at it clearly from what the title is, from Echo to Athena,
Mhm.
Athena really points toward there's life after trauma. You don't have to be your family's inherited patterns. You don't have to be your own horrible experiences, even if
Mhm.
they started from birth, that you can be something more than that. And how does that relate to money? I mean, there are myriad ways of how it relates to how we deal with our
Mhm.
finances.
I'll just dovetail because that's one of the chapters I wrote was on financial literacy, and I used Athena as well because one of the things from trauma-informed work is when we come to a place of integration and resolution and real healing around our past traumas, the emotional charge related to it subsides and you get the wisdom that comes from it. And Athena's story, along with her origin, it represents wisdom. And she's also a weaver and she's a warrior as well. She's a powerful, empowered woman that I find is very integrated in her masculine and feminine as well. Like she's just a force. She's also feminine in different ways in relationships and supporting men in her life in different ways. But her wisdom is what I really drew from in the chapter that I wrote, and how when we come to our finances and we allow ourselves to be informed by the the past and whatever's gotten us to this point, and having that self-awareness of what might make it easy in some ways to deal with some finances and more challenging in others, and then really having that polarized opposite of Echo, this wounded self that can bring a lot of love and compassion as well, right? So there can be a lot of grace towards what it is that's causing me to not feel like I have as much of a voice in my finances, whatever that might be. And then from that self-aware place, being able to tap into universal wisdom, a sense of you're not alone, you can get the right supports if you need to. How can you weave in the different talents and abilities that you have? And then I also love from the feminine perspective, I'd love for you to speak a little bit about this in your own transformational journey is there's a whole other way of interacting with money and finance that is not the more masculine, aggressive, pushing, forcing, as opposed to allowing, receiving, and being in a flow, which comes much more from a place of being coherent. Like when we have that sense of really feeling healthy and whole internally, we're able to tap into that flow. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what's happened for you on your journey around money.
Yeah, well, Emily, that's why I always appreciate conversations with you because it always comes back to the idea of coherence and of this
Mhm.
balancing of there is a place for pushing and really driving things to happen, and that's the masculine, and we need it. And then you're right, the feminine is the receiving. So the feminine is the chalice, right? It's kind of the cup where we just get to be and receive things. And in my work as a coach and a therapist, I've seen that that's often harder for people. It's not
Especially in
pleasant
the West.
times,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right. It's not
Uh-huh.
pleasant, but it's what we tend toward, and we tend to think that it will solve everything. So
Yeah.
full transparency, I'm not immune to that. I have had issues with leaning too much into pushing too hard or trying to force things to happen. And what has happened to me over my life is I would have these episodes of chronic health issues. And I think that
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
relatable to a lot of women. um, Interestingly, though, what would happen to me is that I would be unable to work. So, I've had chronic Lyme. I had Lyme disease really severely for 6 years, many years ago, and then I actually had baby. I started the book project. I had a relapse. So I had a severe relapse of neurological Lyme midway through this project. And I don't think I've talked to you specifically about this, Emily, but that was no coincidence.
No.
That wasn't a coincidence. That was a need for more healing of inherited trauma.
Yeah.
And that time in my life was extremely painful, physically painful, but also very, very illuminating. The minute I took a vacation, a forced vacation away from all of it, it's like my life just showed up for me in abundance. And I was like, this is my inherited pattern. This is the reason why I was driven to write this book. This is the reason why I was driven to write the last book. And I've
Mhm.
got to get it. I've got to figure it out that I don't have to collapse in order to receive. And I think for women, this is a huge problem.
Oh, I'm so glad you were willing to share that part of your story. I think it's so important for people to hear it, and it is a very universal experience. And our physical bodies will absolutely tell us when we are out of balance, when we're not in coherence. And it's typically little tiny nudges. Like, I'm guessing before you had the full-on relapse, your body might have started to tell you in little ways, and we tend to ignore it, right? It's subtle, it's not loud, but the body will let us know. And then when we ignore and ignore, it will hit us pretty hard. And when we get the learning, it's all about, do we stay on that path? Oh, I don't wanna go back there again. I think about it a lot like, the pendulum swing of the culture, and we get kind of taken by the
Mm,
cultural milieu of showing up in that more masculine way and really pushing and forcing, and we don't have a culture that really honors and allows us to feel like we can thrive if we're in a place of receivership. And I
mhm.
just love how you shared that because I've had that happen so many times where I've taken specific time off. I've taken myself offline and then I come back and I have like 3 new referrals, and it's like, that was effortless. Like, certainly effort was made at certain times for it, but to allow for that space of receivership is so important, and that gratitude for it as well, I think is really key. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that part of your journey. I think
Yeah.
it's so very important. And with that, how do you see going forward with this book that has just been birthed? And I wanna share that you have had so many different aspects of the divine feminine in birthing this book, from it coming from your head, right? Like, you had this, vision to this collective consciousness of bringing forward, like, inviting and being collaborative, right? This is a very collaborative book. There's nothing competitive about it. There's how many different contributors are part of it? There must be, like, there's more than a dozen, right?
Tw
There's, like,
20,
there's
I believe.
tw
Yeah, there are
20
22
people.
stories, I believe. Yep, 2 men,
Yeah.
and the rest women. Yeah.
Yeah, and putting a call out and seeing who responded, making requests of people, seeing who responded, and then how you've held it. You've created this huge container for all of us, and all the ways that you've facilitated conversation, input, the whole dance with the cover. Like you found an artist, found the artwork, and then got feedback. I know I was pretty vociferous about my feedback, and you shifted it. And it was like, wow, you created that space for women's voices to be heard amongst us, even when you'd already gone down quite a pretty significant path with telling us the decision and then switching and saying, oh, I need to include this new feedback into it. And you emulated what I think this book is all about, which is that inclusive responsiveness and allowing for what's trying to emerge as opposed to forcing something through.
Well, thank you, Emily. I really appreciate that compliment. And that was all part of the evolution of my evolution. I think there's another kind of underlying thing in our culture about the competitiveness of women, or that women can be difficult to work with. I know in more corporate environments, women can be so brutal to each other. And you're right, this was really a space for me too to relearn how to
Yeah.
lovingly work with women and how good women can be together. Because I came from healthcare, my original, it's not a pleasant place for women.
Oh,
It's very hierarchical and cruel. So I think for women who are in those sorts of scenarios and they think, oh, well, I can't work with women, or whoa, I get along
mhm,
better with men, or whatever,
mhm.
that there are spaces out there, and that writing together can really help you become closer and work better together.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I'd love for you to share a little bit about the writing process and the transformative nature of the writing itself. I know I'm an avid writer. I have another book coming out in November. I and highly collaborative, and I really love the writing process, and I find that it really nurtures my soul. It's a creative act that's really important for me, and it's not necessarily easy. Like I have a reading disability and I have to move through resistance and challenge to do it, and it's always so rewarding and so much more meaningful. And what happens when I get into the creative process is super inspiring to me. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about what happened for you as a result of writing your first book and then doing this one, and the transformational power of writing for you.
Writing has been absolutely life changing. So, anyone listening, if you're not writing, I would highly encourage you to start writing. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's Julia Cameron's morning pages, that's a great place to start. It's like a
Yeah, nobody's going to read
no,
it. It's like
right, no
there's no
critique
pressure. Yeah,
on
yeah, no critique. Yeah, it's
writing.
just for you.
So that, or jumping into something like this. So I was not an expert in Greek mythology. I was not an expert in the great wealth transfer. I was an expert in my lane in working with
Right.
families, but I wasn't the expert in all of your experiences. So writing the introduction and writing the first chapter and then writing the last chapter took a lot of feedback from the group to get it right, because I was framing everyone's
Yeah.
stories. And there was a lot of being open to critique and to learning. I almost felt like I was a journalist while I was doing this, because
Oh,
I was
interesting.
not people like Thomasina Williams, who wrote the last chapter of the first section. I learned so much from Thomasina. She gave me so much critique about specifics and details and what her clients were hearing. And when you just go in with that beginner's mind and write about a subject that maybe
Mhm.
you didn't know much about, which I didn't really, other than reading Echo and Athena, I wasn't like a Greek scholar, but I learned a lot about the characters, and I learned a lot about the culture of the Greeks at the time and how misogynistic it was. And these are the basis of what is in our mind about who we are as a culture and as a person. Then there's a lot to be unpacked there. But the one thing I would say is write with people who are vastly different from you that would be
Mm.
like a very transformational experience if you get to
Mhm.
write with people from diverse places and backgrounds. Write from your instinct. I just had an instinct to write these, that these were a fun idea. These were like a fun idea. I didn't think I was going to spend 3 years on this project, Emily. I, I thought I was just going to write a silly little book and then move on, and it was going to be a fun little project. And now it's turned into almost its own business plan. I mean, that it on its own is
And
has a
there's nothing silly about it, I have to say. The seriousness, the commitment, the passion that everybody brought to it, and you magnetize, somebody who is a Greek mythology expert to really support us. Like, okay, I need for my chapter that I did with Akasha on the, work-life balance and masculine feminine balance. It's like, okay, I need a really great Greek myth about this. And she helped me find the one on Gaia and Uranus and how to really bring more of that story into it. And I found that really insightful and illuminating in terms of what you're saying, in terms of, wow, this is an origin story that's really quite violent and painful. And it just sets up this dynamic of man and woman being adversarial and this kind of fear of power and control. And it's like, oh, they were trying to work out their trauma as they were writing these myths. And trying to find a myth in Greek mythology where men and women were like on an equal platform and really coherent with each other, I don't think we were able to find one. I mean, Gaia and Uranus had it for a bit until he got threatened by the kids again, like the same thing about Athena and the potentiality of what could happen when men and women, when feminine, masculine are balanced and totally aligned. I mean, that is so inspiring to me. And that's why I got excited about the book in terms of wow, if we can change the culture myth, the cultural narrative about the man woman experience, what might be possible for us and the earth as a result.
Yes, and I think this is gonna be really interesting going through the great wealth transfer because there are already people writing about what is gonna happen with men and women when women predominantly hold the financial power.
Mhm.
And we already know from statistics that divorce rates are higher because of that. Men really struggle when women have access to more money than they do. We don't talk about this in the book, but I think that's the next evolution of families is going to be how do we rectify this?
So Rochelle comes from a trauma informed therapeutic background, and I'm a former marriage and family therapist as well. And my training was in narrative therapy and also redecision therapy. And so I really come at this from the lens of, wow, we need to change the cultural narrative of what this looks like. And this book really brings a new narrative and a new framework that can allow for that in a way that's really inspiring to me. And it's interesting because narrative therapy is about kind of changing the story line by line, like as do we want to go in this direction or that? And redecision therapy is about changing the plot line. And so instead of like taking apart every single line, it's really about, wait, do we like the direction the story's going in? Can we like say that this is the ending of this part and let's like, what's the next plot direction we wanna have, and how can we have it go in a different way? And we're seeing it, right? Like, the dystopian future plot lines that we have been fed for so long are leading us in a very dramatic way to a lot of concerns about what's gonna happen on this planet. We can change that narrative, and what does that look like to do that? So, I think what you've done with this book is really allow us to really look at how we can take trauma-informed ways of thinking about the world and change the narrative in a big way.
Yes, Emily, and your chapter really addresses your and Akasha's chapter really
Mhm,
addresses that idea of balance. And, you know, many people will read the book and they will get different things out of the book.
mhm.
But if it were a, kind of choose your own adventure and you read the first page and then you went to Emily's chapters, it would really be about this idea of coherence, especially in our families. And we know, I've been thinking a lot about family units sticking together for survival, but also for financial growth. Oh, that's one thing that came out of this, actually. My sister and I, who've had a tumultuous relationship, to say the least. She's 4 years younger than me. She lives in Nashville. We love each other dearly, but listen, we didn't get along great. So, out of this book, we actually were closing on our first real estate deal this weekend.
What?
So we decided, instead of letting my mom's um, retirement sit in the bank, we're gonna make a real estate portfolio and give her income while she's alive. And this is kind of taking her financial knowledge just a little bit further, and also ensuring that we're gonna have a better inheritance when my mom is gone. So the three of us, the three women that are left, my father is no longer alive. We've decided collectively that we're going to pool our resources and just start this real estate venture
And
together.
how did that happen because of the book?
I shifted myself enough to think, wait a minute, if I'm thinking about inheritance for other families and for women, and we are the women, and what are we going to do? We've got this pot of money. How can we make it grow currently? In the current state that it is, my mom is a widow. She's worked hard her whole life, but she's not an investment guru. And she trusts us enough that we're going to grow her assets for her while she's alive. So even though it's for high net worth families, I didn't come from a high net worth family. This was not my world necessarily, but these principles of coming into coherence make everyone wealthy.
Exactly. And it allows for those relationships, like you and your sister get a chance to relate on a whole other level as
Mhm.
adults around financial decisions, around caring for your mother collectively, collaboratively with this in a way that wasn't really available to you before you stepped into this, like from the Echo place to the Athena places. It sounds like
Correct.
you were able to integrate more of who you are and have that sense of coherence in how you operate, and then it opened that up that you were able to do that with her. That's a remarkable story.
Yeah, and that would be my highest hope for people reading the book, is that they use it as something that they can go back to over and over again, kind of like Morgan Housel's books, right? You can revisit Morgan Housel's writing over and over again. The psychology of money is just something that we need on a regular basis to revisit this idea of behavioral finance. And I would hope that women can do the same with our book as well.
Yeah, that's so great. Wow, and when, you think about what's next for you, right? You have written 2 books, plus getting your health back, plus your little boy's growing. What's next for you? Because I think that you also have started a new endeavor, and I would love for you to share a little bit about Memoir Me and what does it mean and how it ties into what you've discovered.
Yeah, so I'm really refining my contribution to the world. So, Memoir Me is also about capturing the narratives of our families. So, whether it be our grandparents or our parents or ourselves, it's actually filling in the gap. Well, there are services out there that will write memoirs for you currently, but Memoir Me actually reaches individuals who don't use technology, so only on the telephone. So the demographic that doesn't want to use apps and things like that. So what we're doing with Memoir Me is we're capturing those stories and turning them into memoirs for families, and a way that you can stay more connected with your family even if you don't have time to call them necessarily. So there's kind of some communication back and forth, and the technology that just binds families together. The theme of all of my work, Emily, is that, families are coherent, and that they're coherent through the stories that are either told or untold. And usually the untold stories, scarily enough, have more of an impact than the told stories.
Yeah, I love that, and I would strongly encourage people to look into that or other ways of capturing those stories, especially while the people in your family are alive and well and able to share them. I interviewed my 91-year-old father on the Wealth Coherence podcast not too long ago, And he was distressed a little bit afterwards because he couldn't remember a lot of things. So in terms of like the questions that I had about the past or different things, like there were some things he could remember, but he's just not able to access those memories the way that he used to. So I love that you're doing that. It's like the one thing, if I had like one high horse that I'm on, it's really about get out there and ask those questions and get those answers before it's too late, right? My mom died when I was 14. Tons of questions I never got to ask her or collect her memories from a very young age because it was so sudden. And now my dad on the other side is so old and he's doing great. He still plays tennis 3 times a week. He's amazing, really loves life. But his access to those historical stories, while they live in him, he's not able to share them in the way that I would hope that you'd want to be able to capture. So I love that you're empowering people to capture those easily and to do it before it's too late.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, thanks so much for being here. We'll share in the show notes how people can find you, about your work and the trauma-informed work. You're going to be working with a family shortly on using the 10 by 10 learning roadmap and helping them with their next gen learning journey and their culture of learning. And there's so many different things that you do to support families, women, and this the whole conversation about the wealth transfer. I look forward to staying in touch and seeing what's next.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wealth Coherence. If it resonated, I'd love for you to share it or leave a review. This will help others find their way to this space. And if you're ready to keep exploring what it means to live, lead, and give from a place of coherence, head to emilybouchard.com to stay connected. Until next time, be well internally and allow your external life to be the fullest expression of who you truly are.